Welcome to another episode of Talking College Football with JJ Kitchen. Of course, I'm your host, JJ Kitchen. Guys, after a long day of work back from the office, get to talk a little bit of football finally. Another tier list, technically week 9 because of week 0 was obviously Georgia Tech and Florida State to kick off the season. But here we are in really week 9, adjusting the tier list to the ACC. A very good conference. It's great to be a part of it, but more importantly, the quality of football teams we've been watching so far this year, but the complete flip side of different teams that you've seen climb the tier rankings and teams that have really fallen the tier rankings, and what we had in the beginning of the year to what we have right now, all the way through week 9. Obviously, the majority of football teams have really played 6 or 7 games at this point, and it's going to be really good to rank these teams. But first, you guys always know the show is sponsored by Colonial Beer, located at 4986 Library Road in Bethel Park, PA 15102. Guys, as always, a small business. Anytime you're able to reach out and help out a small business here in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, it's always good to reach out and meet those people. But more importantly, run by 2 great Pitt men as well. Their customer service is incredible. And anytime you have the opportunity to help out a small business, it's always a great thing to do so, especially too when they're great people. Please go see my friends at Colonial Beer, located at 4986 Library Road in Bethel Park, PA 15102. And lastly, the show is also sponsored by Thompson Law Group and Brian Thompson, an attorney on your side. Right now, with many people struggling with the economy and rising costs, they're helping many people and businesses with their debts, and they're offering free telephone consultations to assess all options available to those who are struggling, no matter the type of amount of debt they are currently in. You can reach out to them at 724-799-8404 and also check them out at thompsonattorney.com. Again, guys, for all of my questions personally, I use Brian. Brian is the best, but especially what's great about Brian is he's not at a big firm. He's at a smaller firm, the one that he created himself, because he cares about his clients and the overall results that they get. At a larger firm, they really look at you as a number. With Brian, it's not about being a number. It's about being an overall person and the relationships he gets to build with the individual. But more importantly, he cares about the results that you get, especially to what you're looking for. He does a great job in the community, and also too has a tremendous family. He does a great job with people overall. Please call Brian today at 724-799-8404 or give him a call at 724-799-8404 or visit him at thompsonattorney.com. Guys, again, another great slate of football games, and it's really a lot of fun when you're able to have the opportunity to watch these teams from afar, especially too, obviously, as you guys can see here. I'm a Pitt fan, but the best part is to watch the ACC overall. It's a great conference to be a part of, but more importantly, the amount of games that we get to watch on a high level to really identify which teams are doing which. And we had another great weekend again, a great number of football games, but a number of teams staying undefeated. Some teams didn't play, but it's a good game overall, and we'll be able to dive into that here today. But let me go ahead and share my screen here with you guys as we begin the ranking of each one of these teams. All right. So the first thing, obviously, like last week, when ranking these teams, the biggest thing that I look for is, one, when you go into it here, obviously the biggest difference that you're going to see here is, one, as we start to creep closer and closer to the college football playoff rankings, but also, two, as we get closer to the end of the season, we can really start to bump up playoff teams as we get closer and closer to that year. Now, obviously, as we are sitting here today, I do have no teams in the playoff team discussion right now because, one, we're still a little bit too far out. I mean, technically, you could put really a conference champion contender and a playoff team at this point because of their resumes. I think it really, what I get down to is here a couple more weeks, really about 8 games played for the majority of these teams, we can start to really have that discussion on who's really going to be in that conversation for the college football playoff. So right now, I don't have any teams going to the playoff team just yet, but I've got a number of teams in terms of conference champion contenders to go with them. As we go into the rankings here, obviously, the first one I think is the easiest, really, when I look at their team and quality of how they've played. One, we look at Clemson. Clemson easily in the conference champion contender. Obviously, the one big difference that we continually see week in and week out, obviously Clemson, 5-0 in the conference, 6-1 overall. They've played 7 games up to this point. Their one loss coming to Georgia, which will be really the number 1 team in the country, in my opinion, especially for how they played. at the University of Texas this past weekend. But really, when you look at their overall performance against Virginia this past weekend, a 48-31 victory. I thought Kate Klubnik played a heck of a football game, being able to distribute the football the way he did. Malfa, obviously at running back, I thought he did a tremendous job overall. I think it was kind of funny. Early on, we saw a lot of banter between Clemson and Florida State fans talking about how, Phil Maffa was not going to be one of those guys that steps up this year and potentially wasn't the best back in the conference. He has really established himself at that point. I think he's up there as clearly one of the top guys, if not the number one overall guy. I think, you look at Garrett Riley in terms of his as being the offensive coordinator for Clemson. I think he's done a tremendous job from last year to this year. Really, I think overall, you look at Dabo Swinney, the way he coaches and how he's able to develop, but more importantly, allow the reins really to go to Garrett Riley. Last year, you saw the Clemson offense. This year, you're really starting to see the Garrett Riley offense, which is why you're seeing them put up a number of points throughout these games. And I think they're on a trajectory where you look at them and say, hey, right now they're a conference contender, but pretty soon here in a couple of weeks, we can easily put them in the conversation for a playoff team. And I really, towards the end of this year, I expect them to be a playoff team for how they're built, but more importantly, the way they're playing football right now. I think they're playing a very physical style of offense. A physical style of defense is really what we expect out of Clemson for majority of years, their defense to be up there. But the fact that they've really figured it out on offense really goes hand in hand to what we're looking for in terms of a playoff team. So I expect them to be up there as the years go on. The next team we're going to talk about is Boston College, currently 1-2 in the conference, 4-3 overall. I looked at a team like Boston College, man, and I thought, this is a team that's going to be really able to surprise a lot of people. I think overall, when I watched them early on, they had a close game against Missouri, a top 10 opponent at the time. I think as we go on towards the end of the years, we start to go through this, Missouri is certainly not a top 10 team. I really don't think they're a top 15 or 20 team, to be quite frank with you, with how they've been playing, and especially to these past couple weeks and really slipping by a number of teams. So really, Boston College last week overall, I think, we had them in a good category. I'm really sliding them down to mid, especially to it being 1-2 in the conference, 4-3 overall. Kind of shocking, especially this past weekend when you look at the scoreboards overall. Boston College losing to Virginia Tech 42-21. They got down early. When I was able to go back and watch that game, they really made it a game to a point where they were only down by 7 points, especially 2 going into the second half. But overall, it just really got out of hand very quickly. Virginia Tech, watching them, what they look like in the beginning of the year, losing to Vanderbilt, obviously kind of helping, Virginia Tech standpoint in terms of Vanderbilt being able to beat, Alabama. But overall, when you look at Boston College really losing 42-21, and really a blowout victory for Virginia Tech, those two teams are really going in two different directions. I put Boston College in the mid area because they are 4-3. They are 1-2 in the conference. But if they lose one more game, I think I'm going to start sliding them down even more. But really, the overall expectations going into the season were not high because, Bill O'Brien, who I think is a tremendous football coach, he's really put together a good staff up there. I think Castellanos is really going to be a good quarterback, but just right now they're not playing a good brand of football. They at least stayed in the game. They played tough through 3 quarters of that football game, but really got out of hand in the fourth quarter. But right now they're really showing as a first-year head coach football team. I think next year you could potentially see a really big difference, especially too when they start to get really healthy. They've had a number of different injuries on the offensive side of the football. They've had a couple injuries there on the defensive side of the football as well. But when you look at each team going through the conference right now, I think every team at this point can talk about injuries and what, in terms of what they're able to look like on a day in, day out basis. Every team is really going through a number of injuries. So for me, Boston College really slid down from good to mid. The next one we're going to look at is the Louisville Cardinals. And we look at Louisville, obviously this past weekend, Miami, man, they continue to find a way to sneak out these games. And people could talk about pass interference calls, anything like that. Hey, things come up, things go down. I think that, people talk about overall in the ACC, how lucky Miami has gotten with some of these calls. I think that, this past weekend, another questionable call to me. I think overall, when you're watching Miami, they did go down the football field again, but towards the end of that game, they talked about, was that a forward pass? Was it a fumble? To me, his arm was indeed going forward. So I think overall it was a good call on the field. I thought it was an incompletion for, for obviously for Cam Ward going forward. And I think Cam Ward just really playing out of his mind at this point. But Miami continually stays at the top of the leaderboard in terms of how they continue to climb. In terms of the AP poll, we'll see what they look like in terms of the college football playoff committee. But they beat Louisville at home 52-45. Miami's offense continues to play at a high level. The defense continues to actually get worse. I think as the season goes on, I think one of the biggest things you saw on this team was they were going to be able to play both a good brand of offense because Cam Ward was coming in, the amount of skill talent they have on that side of the football, but you look at their overall class and what in terms of what their roster looks like. I even said when you looked at Miami, I thought they really had the best put together roster overall. And I'm just looking at their defense so far, especially the past couple weeks. When you see a team like Cal put up points against them, Cal's offense was able to put up a number of points, but also too now Louisville. I give credit to to Louisville overall. When you got a guy like Jeff Brom as your head football coach, a guy who really I call as a quarterback whisperer. I think overall he's done a really good job with what he's really had. I mean, heck, his first year in the league, he goes to the ACC title game. I mean, you got to get props to him for that. Obviously, he's an alum of Louisville. I think he's a perfect fit for what they're looking to build. I expect them to get better as years go on. I think they're not going away anytime soon. They're currently sitting right now at 4-3, 2-2 overall. They've had a couple bad losses. Had a tight game there for a little bit with Notre Dame. They just had a couple bad edges here and there that kind of led to the 4-3 record. But overall, they're 4-3 at this point, and people start to ask the question, what can you call them a mid team? Can you call them a good team? And I really struggle with this one because it's not like they're getting blown out. They're scoring a number of different points, especially too when they're at home. They're a 4-3 football team right now. They lost to a team at, like Notre Dame. They lost to a couple other teams as well. But overall, when you look in the overall standings, they're not as bad as what people think. I still think overall, guys, I know they're 4-3, but I really consider them still a good football team. And here's why. Obviously they'll never be a playoff contender. They'll never be a conference champion contender for the route that we're going at this point. But if they lose one more game, I'll really move them down to that midsection to where, they're down in the mid category. But right now they're playing a tough brand of football. I think that game could have really gone either way, especially against Miami, a number 6 team in the country. When you're able to play at a high level of football like that with Jeff Brom really conducting himself on the offensive side of the football, especially too with the skill position and the skill players he has on that side of the football and offense. I got to give them as a good football team still. They're putting up major amounts of points, but if they can just figure it out on defense, I think they're almost there. As long as they keep it together, they don't just quit on the whole year. They stick to what Jeff Brom's coaching and what he's truly teaching. I still think that Louisville is still a good football team, and they continue to show that. But in this coming week, we'll see what they look like. But if they lose again, I think I can really consider dropping them at that point because you have to start really asking questions when it comes to that point. The Syracuse Orange, obviously 5-1. I still have them up here. They have one loss in the conference. I still have them as a conference champion contender. The reason why, even though they do have one loss overall, they beat NC State this past weekend 24-17. Kyle McCord continues to be one of the better quarterbacks up there with Cam Ward, Eli Holstein. You look at this conference overall with quarterback play, I think it's been really good overall. But when you look at this team from top to bottom, I think they play a tough style of football. You look at overall, I mean, for a guy who's in his first year coaching, as a head coach overall, was never a defensive coordinator, was never a coordinator at all, really any level. Fran Brown, obviously the new head football coach at Syracuse, comes over from Georgia, really brought that style of toughness up to Syracuse. Obviously, Fran Brown is from the New Jersey area, so he really fits what Syracuse is looking to do. Called it his dream job when he got there. You're seeing a lot of emotion, a lot of passion, how he coached these guys. And obviously he's got Robinson, the former the defensive line coach at Texas A&M, is his defensive coordinator up there. Those two are really good friends. They continue to put together a good staff up there. They've been coaching those guys really well. Kyle McCord, the quarterback transfer from Ohio State, has thrown for over 300 yards every single game up to this point. They actually come to Acrisure Stadium this Thursday to face the My Pitt Panthers. I think at this point, that'll be the best quarterback Pitt's faced to this point. I think he's a tremendous football player. I think that overall, maybe there's some issues there with Ryan Day, maybe in terms of development, but you're really watching, in really a quarterback-driven conference like the ACC, you're watching Kyle McCord really play at a high level. I think just overall, how he's been the leader of that football team, he's a captain of that football team. I think just overall, you have to look at a guy like that and say, hey, he's playing a damn good brand of football. And with only one loss, and we're only going into really the eighth game of being played overall in the conference, overall in the season. I think that when you look at Syracuse, they've got one loss in the conference, but you really can't count them out yet. You could still see some crazy losses in there. Miami still faces, Clemson. They could potentially have one loss. Pitt still faces Clemson. They could have a potential loss there. So overall, I think you still have Syracuse in that conversation. And if they beat Pitt this week, they will be ranked at 6-1. They will be ranked in the top 25 as the next week goes on. So shout out to them. I think they're playing a good brand of football at this point. Now we go to the University of Virginia. I'll tell you what, this is a team that I would have never thought in a million years would be jumping up the charts like they have been these past couple weeks. Obviously, you looked at Virginia. They lost to a really good Clemson team. I didn't expect them to beat Clemson. They're 4-3 overall. They're 2-2 in the conference. They haven't had the toughest schedule in the world, which is kind of what led me to put them in a certain range. I'm going to put them in the mid category, but they're 4-3, 2-2 overall. They're a tough out, but when you just really watch them overall, you saw why. Especially two there in the fourth quarter. They put up 21 points in the fourth quarter, but I think really what happened really there was that they only had 10 points up to that point. I think Clemson really let off the gas pedal a little bit, which is really on them. Good football teams don't do that. And Clemson's a good football team, but in that moment, in that fourth quarter, letting off the gas pedal a little bit, Dabo Swinney was not happy on the sideline, especially when I rewatched the tape. Some miscommunications. Obviously, being up 48-10, they put some backups in. And I understand people are going to, Clemson fans will come back and tell me, well, they gave up 21 points. They had the backups in. At the end of the day, they still had a number of different starters in there rotating in and out. I know they were rotating more guys in, especially two in that towards the end of the third quarter and the fourth quarter. But overall, man, you're giving up 31 points overall. But you got to when you look at Virginia playing at Clemson to come back like that, they're a tough out. They're a tough physical football team. But I got to put them in the mid category, 4-3. If they lose one more game, I'm going to start putting them down towards the bad category because then you start to have to ask questions again. But they fought back. They never quit. But at one point in that game, it's 48-10. You're really getting spanked at that point. But Tony Elliott, a guy was really coaching for his job this year. If he can get to that, that 7 or 8 wins this year, I think you have a real conversation about, hey, maybe you found the right guy. You go into another year where he wins 8 or more games again, you might have found your guy at Virginia in terms of their expectations of what they can do. It's a great school, obviously academically. Obviously, Tony Bennett. Obviously, the sad news there that he resigned. He's retiring out of college basketball. But overall, you look at a school like Virginia. The last time they were really elite in terms of going towards the AC championship game was really Bronco Mendenhall years when you saw how he was able to coach that football team. So we'll see what Tony Elliott looks like. He's certainly still coaching for his job, to say the least. But if he can get 7 or 8 wins this year, he'll certainly be back again for the Virginia Cavaliers. Obviously, you got the University of Miami. We're certainly putting them in the conference champion contender category. Obviously, you watch them; they are just a rampant offense with Cam Ward and the amount of guys they got on the outside, skill set positions. I think the offensive line has really done a good job up to this point. There's a little bit of pressure here and there whenever Cam Ward drops back to whenever I watch their tape. But overall, their offense is moving at a high rate. They got a bunch of talent. Again, I've said it before. I looked at this past year. I looked at all the rosters. To me, Miami has the best roster, but the question marks on defense right now continually linger there. In previous games, and even in this game, fans will come back and tell me, well, there was questionable calls. It should have been a fumble. Going back and watching that game, I thought it was a forward pass. I still thought there was a questionable call against Virginia. I thought Virginia Tech caught that ball in the end zone at Miami. They had that debacle. Then they had a debacle at Cal. There was a block in the back towards the end of the game, especially on that final drive. Number of different calls in that game. But guess what? At the end of the day, Miami is a football team that finds ways to win. And no matter what people say about the referees, anything going on in the ACC, which I think overall the ACC refereeing has been bad this year. College football referees have just been bad overall. But guess what? Miami's finding ways to win. They're undefeated at this point at 7-0. A consistent, just on offense, just tearing it up on offense. Even against Cal, when they were down by 21 plus points, they came back and was able to beat Cal. That just tells you how lethal their offense is, and they're certainly a contender. They win a couple more games. They're at 7-0. They get to really, let's say 2 or 3 more wins, especially how they whopped Florida out of the SEC early on in the year. they're pretty much creeping up to that point. They're a playoff team almost pretty much. I think once they get to 10 wins, I would really put them as a playoff team at that point. Even with 2 losses, I would expect them to get in there in terms of playoff. Coming to Georgia Tech, Georgia Tech this past weekend obviously faced Notre Dame. They lost 31-13, 5-3 overall. Georgia Tech, when you look at Georgia Tech in the standings, really they're in the middle of the pack, 3-2 overall in the conference, 5-3, 3-2 in the conference, 5-3 overall. For me, I'm putting them still, and I know it was 31-13. At halftime it was 14-7. Was still a tight football game. It was really competitive for a lot of that time. At the end of the third quarter, it was really 21-7. It was starting to break away, and they really broke away in that fourth quarter. To me, I just think with some of the bad losses that they've currently had, they're still, I'm putting them in the mid category, but overall, they're still a tough physical football team. Brent, when you look at Brent Key, obviously coming out, obviously he's best friends, obviously with Nick Saban, was on the Nick Saban staff for a number of years, just really coaches that football team up. Haynes King is going to be out again. I think they're going to be just up, they're going to be up and having an uphill battle again. I don't expect them to win. They'll be 5-4. I'm putting them in that mid category for a number of different reasons. I think Haynes King, I think just, if he can just find a way to become more consistent and really develop himself as a passer, I think I could really start to be more fearful of Georgia Tech and move them up into that good category, but they're just not there right now. I think they just continually have to continue to build their great run. I'll tell you what, up front, they're a physical bunch. Up front on offense and defense, they're a physical style, especially too how they control the line of scrimmage. That's a Brent Key. It's a Brent Key type of team. But overall, I just think right now they're a mid football team, especially too now with Haynes King out. I just think that they're just in a downward spiral at this point. If he was starting and they won this week, and I'll tell you this, if they win this week, I can really bump them up to that good category, sitting at 6-3. I'll put them right back up there. They can certainly climb again. But right now, I think just right now they're a mid football team. When it comes to Syracuse, when it comes to Stanford, obviously this past weekend, Stanford did not play this past weekend. They had an off week. Overall, when you look at the ACC standings overall, Stanford right now 1-3 in the conference, 2-5 overall. Again, it's a rebuilding year, and we kind of called that even with Coach Traylor. He's up there right now. He's obviously got a good win. He's got one really good win against Syracuse, and obviously in the dome up in Syracuse, New York. But that's really the only good win he's had overall. Had a close game with TCU out of the Big 12. But I think that this is just a rebuilding year for them. And I think that when they continue to build a team the right way, which he is currently doing right now, they'll be a team to watch. They've certainly been in every single game up to this point. They played a physical type of football. But guess what? Sometimes your record really tells you what you truly are. And when you're 2-5 overall, and what did I say here in the conference? In my notes here, in the conference, they're 1-3 over, 1-3 in the conference, 2-5 overall. Kind of the record sometimes tells you what you truly are at this point, and just really a bad football team at this point. But it's a rebuilding year, so you really expected that, especially going into the ACC. Now Virginia Tech, I had them in the mid category a week ago. Right now they're sitting at Virginia Tech in the middle of the conference, 2-1 overall, only one loss in the conference, 4-3 overall. I think their schedule gets a little bit tougher here coming up. Obviously, this past weekend, they did a really good job. They won a football game against, who did I have here? Just talked about them, actually. Duh. Where do I have them here? Virginia Tech, obviously, in Boston College. They beat a Boston College team who I had was good. I had them in the mid category last week. They beat a team like that 42-21 at home. Allowed Boston College to get back into it in the third quarter. They were up 28-0, almost blew a 28-point lead, but they really turned it on in the fourth quarter, allowing them to get back in. Obviously, you can look at a Virginia Tech team 4-3 overall, 2-1 in the ACC. They're 2-1 in the ACC. They have that one loss, so you can really almost put them in that conference champion contender at this point because they have that one loss. But I'm keeping them up here in the good category because I think overall it's a little bit nerve-wracking when you watch a football team like that, 28 points, and their defense continues to struggle, allows them back into the football game, 21 points. Obviously, in the third quarter, they shut them out in the fourth quarter. It's a little bit of a slippage there. I think overall they win again this week, and they go to 3-1, 3-1 overall in the conference. I think I'm going to have to move them up in the conference champion discussion. You look at Brent Brent Pry, obviously coming over from Penn State, the defensive coordinator from Penn State. He's now in his second season at Virginia Tech. I think that this brand of football they're really playing right now, they continue to develop. They continue to play at a high level right now. He wins again this weekend. I'm going to put them up in the conference champion contender because they'll be 3-1 at that point. They'll be number one loss teams up there, like with the Clemsons of the world or Syracuse's of the world. Obviously, in terms of the one-loss teams and in the conference champion contenders, I think overall they win one more game. I'll be more solidified to put them up there. But almost blowing a 28-point lead has me a little bit concerned on the defensive side of the football. But their offense has certainly figured it out. Drone's playing at a high level right now. I thought he looked really good in that game on this past weekend. He continues to play like that. I think overall you'll be able to watch this team really continue to develop and grow. Then you look at Duke. Duke, first off, congratulations to them. The first time ever that they've beaten Florida State in their history. I watched that game. I wanted to watch it overall because Florida State just continues to just be horrendous this year. That's truly a bad football team in the ACC. But Duke, 6-1 overall, 2-1 in the conference. They beat Florida State, a bad football team. They're 23 and 16 overall. 23-16, but they're 6-1 overall. I look at this football team and how they were playing. Overall, when you look at this team, you look at the game overall. Again, Duke was really up 17-6 at halftime. 17-6 at halftime. They're playing a great brand of football. Playing, really Manny Diaz in his first year at the helm at Duke. Malik Murphy. I still have some question marks about Malik Murphy. Obviously he's a redshirt freshman, transferred in from the University of Texas, wanting to get more playing time. He's certainly getting that as a starter. Obviously in the ACC at Duke. His completion percentage is some real question marks around there. I think overall with their offense, there can be some real question marks. There are times that their offense is really sporadic, really not finding a way to score points. But you look at their defense right now, playing at a high level. I have them not in the championship contender, even though they have one loss, because they're just a little bit inconsistent. I have them as a good football team. And, you look around the country, people talking about, well, it's Duke football. It's Duke football. They're not good. I mean, if you're going to lose to Duke, if you're playing competitive with Duke, I got news for you. Duke's a damn good football team. And again, if they win another conference game, they go to 7-1, you can bet your ass I'm putting them in that conference champion contender. Actually, as a matter of fact, they have one loss and they're playing at a high level like that. I'm putting them in the conference champion contender because I think overall they're playing a great brand of defense, playing a tough physical style of defense, especially too with Manny Diaz there. He did a tremendous job as defensive coordinator at Penn State for a couple years there. Understood he was looking for a certain job, gets back into the ACC. Obviously, that football game against Miami is going to be pretty funny overall when that renewed discussion happens again. But I got them up in their conference champion contender because you know what? They beat Florida State. Yeah, it was at home, but overall it was a tight football game. I still like the way they're playing. If they win again, they'll stay up there. If they lose, I'm going to bump them down to the good category. Wake Forest, I got them down in the bad category. I think, again, guys, you look at the standings here. They're 1-2 in the conference, 3-4 overall. I think, you look at, again, Wake Forest, the smallest Power 4 team in the country. I appreciate how hard they fight. Obviously in 2021, they made it to the AC title game. That was a hell of a football team with Sam Hartman. They had times where their defense there, in 2021 was just not good, but they were scoring points at a high rate. In this collective of NIL, I just don't see how Wake Forest is going to compete really at all in this and really in college football. I really do think that they're going to continue to falter. And again, Wake Forest is a good institution, but being the smallest P4 team will only hurt you. And I think that their overall, alumni has never been big into donations. Their NIL collective is extremely small, one of the smallest in the country. They're just in a tough bind. And I think overall, I feel bad for them because it's a very proud fan base, especially too when we faced them in the AC championship game. You certainly saw that, but Wake Forest going forward, I just don't see how they're going to compete at this level in terms of college football and the NIL collectives and what they're able to do. But so far, 3-4, again, a losing record in the ACC. They're just a bad football team right now. Comes the Cal. I got to move Cal down from mid to bad. And here's why. You saw this past weekend, obviously the previous weekend they faced Pitt. They lost 17-15, missed field goals, can't close games, multiple games. They blew a lead against Miami, a massive lead, 20-plus point lead against Miami. They have a chance to win the game against Pitt, an undefeated Pitt, ranked team. They miss a field goal. They can't hold on to it. They can't close out those wins. Again this weekend, Cal faces, who do we have here? NC State. They miss a field goal again. They can't hold on to the lead. They lose 24-23. At the end of the day, good football teams find a way to win. Bad football teams find a way to lose. And right now, Cal's just in a way of it right now. Special teams has been horrible. At times, their offense is really sporadic. I think their defense, again, you hold a college football team under 30 points, your defense is playing a hell of a brand of football. And again, the head coach at Cal, he's been there for 9 years now. Justin Wilcox, he's an incredible defensive mind. What he was able to do against Pitt when we saw him up here in Pittsburgh, really defensively, what he was able to do, holding Pitt to 17 points. But they're finding ways to lose. And again, their special teams are killing them. But right now, I got to put them in that category right now, being a bad football team, because bad football teams find a way to lose. And you look at their overall record right now, you look at Cal, 0-4 in the ACC. You got to put them in there just for that category. Have not won an ACC game yet. 0-4, 3-4 in the conference. I know overall, what now? They've now lost 4 ACC games by a total of 12 points. I mean, that's tough. I think next year you could really see this Cal team really turn it on to where maybe it's not 0-4, maybe it's 4-0 next year because of how much talent they'll have returning, but just how close they are to winning these football games. But when you're 0-4 in the ACC and you find ways to lose, it can't put you in the mid category. I got to put you in the bad category, especially too when you're 0-4. Florida State, this is pretty simple. This is just a bad football team overall. They look like they've given up most of the time. You've got coaches on the sideline flexing when they're down by 2 touchdowns. It's very bad right now. You've got the memes online with with what's going on with the fan base. It just feels like everything just collectively. Florida State suing the ACC. Now Florida State's the worst team in the ACC. Clearly, not even close. And probably next week if they lose again, I'm probably going to make and instead of having a bad category, I may even just make not just a bad category, but just a Florida State category. And to be honest with you, I probably should. I'm going to add a row below, and then I'm going to hit X here, and I'm going to put here just horrific. Actually, I'm just gonna put FSU because it's just it's just so bad at this point. I try keeping them at bad, but just Florida State is just playing a horrible brand of football. And DJ's hurt, but it's not like he was playing good anyways. He was playing horrible. Florida State fans were happy about that because they wanted to get a different guy in there. I don't care who it is. You never want to cheer on injuries and whatnot. That kind of was a little frustrating, obviously, to watch that happen because DJ's still a good kid. Comes from a great family. Just a tough situation for DJ, man. Especially how he played at Oregon State. But right now, you look at this right now. Florida State just they're horrific at this point, and easily the worst team. So that's why I'm really putting Florida State in that category right there, man. They're just a bad brand of football. Then you look here. Get this out of the way here. North Carolina, I'm putting them not in the FSU category, in the bad category. Again, they had an off week. They had a bye week. They're 0-3, 3-4 in the conference. Mac Brown, he's fighting for his job right now. I would expect him to retire. I don't think North Carolina would ever fire him just because of legacy purposes. They're just playing really bad football right now. Obviously after a number of years between Sam Howell, Drake May, you had just 6 years of just great, overall quarterback play. Just really struggling this year. Obviously, the starter, Max Johnson, goes out. Then their second string quarterback goes out. Obviously, they now have their third string quarterback who came back to North Carolina after transferring away. Just a tough get this year for North Carolina, but they're in a rebuilding year. I expect them to be a lot better next year with what they have currently on the roster, but more importantly, what they have currently in the recruiting class. And whoever's coaching North Carolina next year, I would really think they utilize the transfer portal and what they're able to do. SMU is an easy one for me. You put SMU in the conference champion contender. No losses. No losses in the ACC, 3-0 overall in the ACC, 6-1 for the whole season. Again, they're playing a great style of football. Who would have thought? They take out Stone, they replace him, automatically just boom. Their offense just is flourishing at this point. And I think when you look at this team, they're playing a great brand of football. I think when you look at the ACC, I don't even know if you want to face them at this point. That's how well they're playing. They had a bye week this past week, did not play. I'm sorry, no, mistakenly. They faced Stanford, my fault. Faced Stanford, won 40-10, absolutely just walloped them. I mean, at halftime, it was 31-7. Just really turned it on. Rhett Lashley, obviously previously the offense, he was an offensive coordinator at SMU, then goes to Miami, an offensive coordinator at Miami, then takes the head job a couple of years ago at SMU, and he's just really turned it on. I mean, their offense is just clicking at this point. Defense playing a high-level brand of football, really just dominated, Stanford from the stats here, especially, too, just dominated them from start to finish. They are very much a team that, if they continue the trend that they're on at this point, pretty soon they're going to start jumping up into that category of a team that's a playoff contender. I mean, that's just kind of what it is at this point. They're playing a great brand of football, and Rhett Lashley really has them really moving at a high level and just in terms of coaching, it's so hard. And you watch it around just the college football landscape, you see these head football coaches just really have a loyalty to the quarterback that's their starter. Man, give Rhett Lashley a lot of credit, man. People called him crazy. You're nuts for taking out Stone. SMU, they're going to go right back down to the bottom. Hell no. He's coached this football team up. So shout out to SMU, man. You're playing a high-level brand of football, scoring points at a high level, but playing a physical brand of football. I mean, it's just shout out to Rhett Lashley. It's going to be exciting to watch them overall. And Pitt will be down there in a couple weeks. So it'll be fun to watch that game. Hopefully, we'll still be undefeated. Obviously, right now, they're undefeated overall, just like we are. Man, that's a damn good football team down at SMU. And really, in Dallas-Fort Worth, there's a damn good football team down there. North Carolina State, I'm putting them in the bad category. They lost again this week. I'm sorry, my fault. They won this week. I thought they were going to lose. I had in the notes here against Cal. They beat a Cal team. Obviously, they're 1-3 in the ACC, 4-4 overall. That's great, 4-4 overall. But when you're 1-3 in the ACC, the transfer quarterback from Coastal Carolina, McCall, did not work out. He got hurt. They've had their second string quarterback get hurt. They've had a number of injuries. It's just an off year for NC State. They're a team that really, when you look at NC State, you would expect them to be in that 8, 9, potentially 10 win category. Dave Doran's done a really good job. Tony Gibson, the defensive coordinator down there, always does a tremendous job year in and year out. They're just having a bad year, and it's a rebuilding year. Sometimes that happens. Heck, last year I watched it and right out in front of me at Pitt, going from what they did the past 2 years to 3-9. Now they're 6-0. How they're playing with a different coordinator, an offensive coordinator with Cade Bell. But at the end of the day, just a rebuilding year for NC State. But again, it's an off year for NC State. But guess what? They're still playing a physical, tough brand of football. I think they're going to be a tough out here and there, especially too when a team has to face them. But I expect them next year to bounce back. I mean, I'm not too concerned about Dave Doran overall. That team is really a tough out overall when you watch them from top to bottom. And lastly, my Pitt Panthers. Certainly got to put them up in the conference champion contender, undefeated, 6-0, 2-0 in the conference with conference wins over Cal. And what was the other one? I'm already forgetting. Heck, my Pitt Panthers. I've been researching all these other teams. 2-0 in the conference, 6-0 overall. They got Syracuse this week, who's an undefeated team. Eli Holstein didn't look too good this past week against Cal. He's had 5 great games, 1 bad game. So I look to see him bounce back. Obviously, if they have 1 loss, potentially maybe keep them in that category, depending upon how bad a loss is. Obviously, if they win and they win big, that kind of keeps them certainly in the category for a conference championship contender. And then potentially, too, I think 2 or 3 more wins for them can really put them in the playoff talk contention. But when you look at this football team, man, and then obviously Pitt beat North Carolina and Cal. Obviously, North Carolina, obviously in the bad category. Cal now in the bad category. When you look at these teams, Pitt's got to continue to climb that ranking. I think overall their defense is starting to get a really good footing because early on it looked a little shaky. Their offense really carried them throughout the year. Comeback wins against Cincinnati. Comeback wins against West Virginia. You saw that because the defense struggled early on in football games. They're now getting their footing. It kind of puts me a little bit of a rest. Hey, there's a little bit more confidence. But guess what? The offense has to bounce back this week because if you suffer a loss, you potentially go from a conference champion contender down to good, depending upon what that game looks like. But if you win, you stay in that conference championship contender. So, guys, that's really my list here, man. And I think overall, it continues to shift up and down. When you look at them overall, man, I think when you look at good category to the conference championship contender, look how just wide open it is. Clemson, Syracuse, Miami, Duke, SMU and Pitt really battling for that spot. You still have, obviously Louisville's a good football team, but Virginia Tech only has one loss. They potentially could move up the next category if they win this next weekend. But man, it's just some damn good football overall in the ACC. Guys, so that's our list. But let me know in the comments. I love to hear your guys' comments. Again, I love to see what you guys think. Did I miss something? Where do you guys have certain teams at? I want to know where do you guys have in terms of tier listings. I dropped some teams. I raised some teams. Obviously, I'll drop Florida State again to a whole different level. Let me know your guys' thoughts. I love to hear what you guys think. What is your tier listing? What did I get right? What did I get wrong? And again, the channel continues to grow to a high level. Subscribe down below. We'll be releasing more content. We'll be bringing on David McKenzie, a North Carolina attorney, talking about the updates to the overall court case with Clemson and Florida State. We'll be talking about that. There's going to be a huge discussion. That got a lot of views last time. People that were chiming in, asking questions, sometimes some heated questions. So it'll be a huge debacle when we release that. So if you want to know when that gets released, subscribe to the show. It's free. Subscribe and like this video and let me know your thoughts. Guys, I appreciate it as always and forever. Hail to Pitt, but more importantly, hail to the ACC. I'll see you guys next